Okay, so in this presentation, we're going to go over the body system called the endocrine system. And in the picture, here's three parts of the endocrine system. Well, there's more, but this is just kind of an introduction slide here. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go over the endocrine system and some of the major parts to it. All right, so in this diagram here we have the 8 major glands if you're in my biology class that I want you to know. The diagram shows what are called glands of the endocrine system. And first of all, glands are simply organs, but if you notice, they're all physically disconnected to one another. It's not like the digestive system. Notice in this diagram, the digestive system, all the organs are connected to one another. The esophagus connected to the stomach connected to the small intestine connected to the large intestine. It's not like that. If we put back the diagram of the endocrine system, you can see that they're all just kind of physically disconnected. And some of the jobs of the endocrine system are listed here. It helps control growth, helps in our development as we mature over the years and go through the various stages of development. For instance, adolescence and puberty and into our old age years. And the endocrine system also releases chemicals that help us respond to our environment. And so one thing that all these glands have in common, again, glands are simply organs, and that's what we call the organs of the endocrine system. So the thymus is a gland, the pancreas is a gland, and one thing they all have in common is all glands make hormones. And the hormones are chemical signals that move through blood. So the thymus will release a chemical signal called a hormone that will move through blood. And that hormone will cause another part of the body to respond in some way, depending on what the hormone is. And so what hormones are going to do in a moment, we'll have a nice little animation of this. In a moment, I'm going to show you that hormones are released perhaps from cell A. They travel through the blood, and the hormone might actually attach to cell B. Cell B would be what we call the target cell. So hormones are released from one cell, and the hormones are received by another cell. We call that the target cell. The target cell is going to receive the hormone, and ultimately the target cell is going to produce proteins. So hormones stimulate target cells to make proteins. And ultimately, we're going to go over in just a moment 2 categories of hormones. So here we go. Here's category number 1 of hormones. Let's go over that next. So the first kind of hormone I want to mention are called steroid hormones. Now, steroid hormones have recently got some bad reputation in the world of athletics because there's some cheater athletes that are trying to take larger amounts of steroid hormones than are produced by the body naturally. So one thing I want to stress, steroid hormones are naturally produced by the body. And in the animation, we have a cell in the middle releasing steroid hormones into the blood. So we have the cell in the middle called the secreting cell because it's releasing those black dots that are symbolic of the steroid hormones. And so it's releasing the hormones into the blood. Well, let's follow those black dot steroid hormones here. When we follow those black dot steroid hormones, notice how in the animation the steroid hormone is bouncing off of that V-shaped receptor. It's because it doesn't fit. So there are what we call target cells and there are what we call non-target cells. In this case, the steroid hormone doesn't fit that particular receptor on the outside of that non-target cell. Look to the right. There's a receptor inside of that non-target cell. Notice it also has a V shape. So the round steroid hormone just won't match that V-shaped receptor. So steroid hormones have to be shaped properly in order to match the receptor of the target cell. Sometimes the receptor is on the outside of the cell, sometimes the receptor is on the inside. So what happens is in this case, steroid hormones are going to attach to receptors that are located inside of the target cell. In our animation, a black dot representing the steroid hormone just attached to this receptor. Well, what happens next? The receptor and the steroid hormone go into the nucleus and the hormone will attach to a gene, a DNA gene. Remember, a gene is simply a segment of DNA, and a gene helps to code for the creation of a protein. So the steroid hormone goes into the nucleus, attaches to a gene, and it activates that gene so it will produce proteins. That's the advantage that cheater athletes are looking to obtain. They're taking extra amounts of steroids than normal so they can produce extra amounts of protein than normal. Proteins help build muscle, protein helps to recover from injury, and that's the advantage that the cheater athletes are trying to obtain. But one thing to stress is that hormones are naturally produced by the body. So what about the other kind of hormone? Let's do that next. Second category of hormones. Well, if the first category is called steroid hormones, the second category has the very original name of non-steroid hormones. And like steroid hormones, non-steroid hormones are naturally produced by the body. And in the animation, again, we have in the middle a secreting cell releasing a bunch of these black circles representing the non-steroid hormone. And notice how they're going into the blood, and the bloodstream is just carrying them away. Well, let's follow them. We follow, here we have a receptor located on the outside of the cell. So notice one of the differences. Some cells have receptors on the outside. Some cells have receptors on the inside. A non-steroid hormone will attach to a receptor on the outside. Notice how the shape of the non-steroid hormone and the receptor match. Well, in this case, what happens next is that this is going to start a series of chemical reactions. The non-steroid hormone actually never enters the target cell. The non-steroid hormone, watch this, the non-steroid hormone is going to start a chemical reaction, a series of chemical reactions where chemical reaction A leads to chemical reaction B, leads to chemical reaction C, and the products of chemical reaction C, for instance, will go into the nucleus and will, like the last time, stimulate the production of proteins. So the target cell, the end result is kind of the same thing in that the end result is the production of proteins. It's just a little different pathway that is chemically taken, a little different pathway that is chemically taken to achieve that goal of creating a protein. Okay, so here's our diagram showing basically above the shoulders 3 major glands. The first one I want to mention is called the hypothalamus, and like all glands, the hypothalamus releases hormones. And so you can see from the notes right now, the hypothalamus releases hormones, and what it might do is the hormones of the hypothalamus might stimulate the gland just below it, called the pituitary gland. And when the pituitary gland receives hormones from the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland might respond by releasing growth hormones. So one thing I want you to see is that hormones communicate. One thing I want you to see is that glands communicate with other glands. The hypothalamus communicates with the pituitary gland in this case. Here's another list of things that the hypothalamus helps to control. Hormones of the hypothalamus help to control growth, reproduction, and body temperature. In the picture, a thermostat that goes on your wall of your house just appeared. Well, our body's thermostat is set at about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. It just so happens the hypothalamus is that thermostat. If our body temperature gets too hot, the hypothalamus will release enzymes to cool us off. If our body gets too cold, the hypothalamus will release hormones that cause us to warm up. We'll have a little more on that a little bit later. Moving on to the next gland. Okay, so the next gland I want to mention is just underneath the hypothalamus. It's called the pituitary gland. And one important duty of the pituitary gland, it'll release hormones that help to control the water level that's in our blood. You know, if we're really dehydrated, our blood might become too thick, and it's really hard for our heart to pump. And so the pituitary gland will start the releasing of hormones, which actually will draw some water out of our bladder where we're storing urine, and that helps to add more water back into our blood. Here's one of the more important jobs here of the pituitary gland, and I just mentioned this a moment ago, is the hypothalamus might release hormones to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland receives the hormones of the hypothalamus and will respond by releasing growth hormones. Growth hormones are sent around the body and it stimulates cell division, it stimulates growth and mitosis. And so this is a really important step as we go and as we enter our puberty years and we grow and we go through adolescence and into puberty and then eventually into old age. Moving on down to the thyroid gland next. Moving on, the next gland I want to mention is in the picture at the bottom. It's kind of in your throat area called the thyroid gland. So the thyroid gland releases hormones just like all the other glands, and the hormones of the thyroid gland help to regulate metabolism, growth, and development. They also helps to increase rate of digestion of our food. So when we eat food, the thyroid gland will send out hormones that helps improve the rate of digestion. Another thing that I know it's not mentioned in the video, but another thing that the thyroid gland also does is when it releases certain hormones, will help to remove calcium that's in our blood, and the calcium that's in our blood will actually go towards helping form bones. So all the glands that you've seen so far, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and the thyroid, they actually all have more than one job to perform. They're the hormones of the thyroid. The hormones of the pituitary, hormones of the hypothalamus often have more than one purpose. They help control a variety of bodily functions. Moving on down down to lower parts of the body. All right, so now that we've moved on down a bit, we come to the purple one labeled the thymus. And hormones released by the thymus cause WBCs to mature so they are able to fight infection. WBCs stands for white blood cells. So when the thymus releases hormones, those hormones will help white blood cells mature, and white blood cells are an integral part of our immune system. They help to fight off bacteria and viruses and other pathogens that might get us sick. So that's one of the really important factors or jobs of the thymus, is to help strengthen basically our immune system. Moving on down next to the pancreas. Okay, so the next gland I want to mention is called the pancreas, and I'm hoping you're familiar with in general that what the pancreas does. It helps to control sugar levels of glucose that are in the blood. And so if the sugar levels are dangerously high, the pancreas will release a hormone called insulin, which will bring the level back down to a safe level. And so after a meal, we have a lot of sugar in our blood. The pancreas releases insulin to lower the sugar to a safe level. Well, what about the opposite? If our sugar levels are ever dangerously low, the pancreas will release a hormone called glucagon, which is going to increase the level of sugar back to a normal safe level. Let's look at both of these in a little more detail. So when glucose levels are high, after you've eaten a meal, glucose levels are high. The G in the picture stands for glucose. So notice how there's a bunch of G's in our blood. Well, now what's happening is a bunch of insulin molecules released from the pancreas are attaching themselves to little channels that are located on our cells. So when glucose levels are high, the pancreas releases insulin that attaches to these closed channels. Watch what happens next. When those channels receive insulin, they open. And when the insulin channels are open, I hope you can see what's going to happen next. The glucose is going to come out of the blood and into the cells. And so now that the glucose is diffusing into the cells, the once high level of glucose in the blood has been lowered to a normal safe level. So anytime we have a meal, after a few hours, our meal is digested, glucose enters our blood and sets off this reaction. This is, again, started by our pancreas. Well, we just saw what happens when glucose levels are too high. What about when the glucose levels are too low? Well, here's a picture of our liver. Our liver is going to receive the hormone called glucagon. Glucagon is another hormone and it comes from the pancreas. Let's zoom in to the liver here. When we do, we see 5 liver cells and they all just received the hormone called glucagon that came from the pancreas. The liver cells are going to respond. When they receive glucagon, they're going to respond by releasing stored amount of glucose into the blood. So if the blood sugar levels, if the glucose levels are too low, the level of glucose will be increased back to a normal safe level because the liver releases stored glucose. Okay, so the next gland I want to go over is called the adrenal glands, and there's actually 2 of them. They sit on top of your kidneys. The kidneys are those 2 brown-shaped objects in the picture, and the adrenal glands release hormones that helps to control our fight or flight response. I'll give you more on that in just a moment. So here we have a heart beating normally. Well, when you're startled, when you have a threat, your adrenal glands are going to respond by releasing a hormone by the name of epinephrine. You might have heard epinephrine called adrenaline. They're the same thing. And what happens in the animation, you can see our heart has begun to beat faster because epinephrine causes your heart rate to increase. This increases our breathing, our alertness, our blood pressure, and so this controls what we call our fight or flight response. In times of stress, or if our body ever senses a threat, for instance, you walk into a dark alley and there's a suspicious character coming at you, your adrenal glands will release epinephrine, which causes your heart rate to increase. And this activates our fight or flight response. In times of stress, in times of a threat, people will just run away from that threat. That's the flight response. We don't literally mean take to the air and fly. Other times when you're faced with a threat or faced with a stress, instead of flight and running away from the stress, you might choose to fight the stress and to fight the threat. But our adrenal glands give us a boost by releasing a hormone called epinephrine. Okay, moving on down, we come to what are called the gonads. And first of all, there's 2 gonads, female gonads and male gonads. Well, let's focus on the female gonads first. The gonads, male or female, influences sexual development. Now, the name of the female gonad, you can see in the picture, are called the ovaries. Now, there's 2 of them, even though the line in the diagram only shows 1, but there's 2 ovaries. And the hormones released by the ovaries are called estrogen and progesterone, and these hormones are released in very large amounts when a young lady enters the puberty years of her life. And so these hormones, estrogen and progesterone, kind of influence sexual development. And here's a list of some of the effects of estrogen. Develops breast tissue, helps mature the ovaries, starts the menstrual cycle, preserves bone density. You know, one of the problems for women as they age, they produce less and less amounts of these 2 hormones. And so they lose bone density as they age. So if ladies, as you age, one of the recommendations is regular exercise because exercise helps to keep that bone density. But the ovaries are the female gonad, and like it says, they influence sexual development. Let's move on to the male gonads next. In men, the gonad is called the testes, and just like in women, the testes help to influence sexual development, only in this case, sexual development in men. And so the hormone that we're all familiar with is the hormone called testosterone. So when a gentleman hits their puberty years of life, the testes will release a surge of testosterone. This testosterone helps to build muscle, helps to develop sperm cells. This testosterone deepens the voice, so it changes the shape of the vocal cords in our throat area. And again, here's a list of some of the effects of testosterone. It increases the sex drive. It makes men more aggressive. Stimulates the growth of facial hair. And so when you look at the gonads of the male and gonads of the female, we can see some of the key points I want you to know is that the sexual development of men and women is greatly controlled by hormones of the gonads. Okay, so the point of this slide right here is to show you that glands communicate with other glands. For example, when our body shivers in order to warm us up. Our hypothalamus, I mentioned earlier, is kind of like the thermostat. It senses that you're cold, and it's going to respond by sending a hormone not a very far distance down to the pituitary gland. I don't really care that you know the name of that hormone. I'm just going to call it hormone A. So the hypothalamus sends hormone A to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland receives hormone A, and it responds by releasing hormone B. Hormone B travels through the blood down to the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland will receive hormone B and send out hormone C to the body. Well, watch what hormone C does. Hormone C causes the body to shake and shiver. This shivering generates heat. All your muscles begin to shake uncontrollably. That heat generates warmth, which warms us up. So this is a great example of how glands communicate with other glands. So if you want, pause the video and examine the diagram here. It's a real nice picture showing the major glands discussed. Actually, I want to show you something else I found that I thought was just kind of enjoyable next. So strangely, I found these pictures when I was searching for images online of the endocrine system, and these pictures really have nothing to do with the endocrine system. I just thought it was a really neat ad campaign from the early 1900s that kind of shows the pathway that people can take as they develop over their years. So this young lady in the picture, she has two paths in life. Which path will this young lady take? Will the young lady at age 13 take the bad path on the left and read bad literature, or will the young lady take the good path on the right, and will she study and be obedient? As time goes by, at age 20, is the woman on the bad path and is she flirtatious? Or on the right, is she on the good path? Is she virtuous? Is she devoted to family? Is she devoted to her religion? At age 26, is she on the wrong path? The left side is the wrong path. You can see she's partying it up, living the fast life. Or at age 26, is she on the right path? Is she a loving mother? And by age 40, if she's on the wrong path, she'll probably be a social outcast. But the path on the right shows an honored grandmother. Again, these have nothing to do with the endocrine system. I'm not even sure why I found these pictures when I Google searched the endocrine system, but I just thought it was kind of a silly way to break up this video because, again, the endocrine system helps us go through stages of development. And when I saw these, I just thought the ad campaign was too neat. I had to throw it in here. Same for the guys. If we have a path that leads to the good for the girls and a path that leads to bad for the boys, what will become of this boy right here? He has two paths. And in this case, the good path is on the left and the bad path is on the right. So at age 15, are they clean and do they study? That's the good path on the left. Or at age 15, are they self-abusive and smoking cigarettes? That's the bad path on the right. And if this continues, at age 25, are they pure? That's the good path on the left. Or on the right, that's the bad path. Are they impure at age 25? And at age 36, the good path. Are they honorable and successful? Or at age 36, are they a degenerate and kind of just walking the streets? And by age 60, if they're on the good path, they've lived a well-rounded, and they're in this case, a grandfather. Or at age 48 on the right, are they a moral and a physical wreck? Again, these pictures have nothing really to do with the endocrine system, but I just thought they were really neat when I saw this social ad campaign from the early 1900s. And another reason why I wanted to show those pictures, I wanted to give you a distractor. I wanted to distract you for a minute or two. And now that I've distracted you, I think, for a minute or two, pause the video and try to identify gland A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. I'm going to go over the answers, but pause it and try to do it yourself. I'm going to go over the answers in 3, 2, 1. So part A is our hypothalamus, located inside the brain. Part B, just underneath the hypothalamus, is our pituitary gland. Part C, in the throat area, is the thyroid gland. Part D, kind of imagine just above where your heart is located. Part D would be the thymus. Part E, there's two of them, one on top of the left kidney, one on top of the right kidney. Part E are the adrenal glands. Part F is located right in between the two kidneys and kind of behind the stomach, although the stomach is not in the picture, and that's the pancreas. Part G, this diagram on the right-hand side shows a female's body. Part G are the ovaries. And part H on the left-hand side of the diagram that shows a male's body, part H would be the testes. Okay, so we've reached the end here. If you're in my biology class, pause the video and try to answer these questions on a separate sheet of paper. I'd be happy to check them for accuracy before class or after class one day. So go ahead and pause the video and bring me some answers, and good luck.